I almost called this episode Ancient Books and Nuclear Engineering Have a Whiskey Baby. So yes, you're going to get some foundational knowledge on what American single malt whiskey is or what it's going to be, but also the people behind it. And it gets weird, man.
You could call it rat piss if you wanted to, as long as you're going to sit down and drink it.
In a good way. Really? Wait.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
In a weirdly good way.
Anthony Bourdain was coming for a visit, 10-liter still. I packed it full of brandy and raw goose livers. His feedback was...
Now, we did an episode about American single malt, I think it was a couple of years ago, and the top comment is about Virginia distilling. So, of course, we had to bring in American single malt. I have so many questions. We couldn't even have an official, clearly defined category, and the level of stuff that's being made.
I think the reason I started paying attention to American single malt was because it was winning awards overseas.
Yep.
Blind competitions, it was beating Scotch. You gotta be proud of that.
There's already tons of potential here. Your next favorite whiskey could easily be an American single malt. So we're gonna get into that practical knowledge base of ASM, but also, how did we get here? We're gonna go all the way back to 1996. That's when Lance Winters, the master distiller at St. George Spirits, was putting his American single malt into barrels.
There were two that came out before ours. One was McCarthy's single malt from Clear Creek Distillery up in Oregon. And then the other one was from a distillery called St. James Spirits that was down in Southern California, essentially an homage to Scotch whiskey, which, again, it's a wonderful thing. But if I want a really good bottle of Scotch, I can go out and buy one.
Which is an interesting point. If we're being frank, is American single malt destined to just imitate the already very well-established single malts from other countries? Is it even reasonable to expect an innovative and unique take on single malts that come out of America? And what exactly is this formalized category of ASM shaping into? From your perspective, where are we at right now with American single malt as a category?
We're founding members of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, and so it's been, for me, almost a decade. The TTV does not do anything overnight, as we've learned, and there's been a pretty strong consensus. I've loved seeing how many distilleries are united in this.
What does that consensus look like right now? Where are we?
Malt, obviously 100% malted barley in the mash bill. Single location, but there were a couple questions about, does it need to be distilled, aged, bottled, all on site, which is what we do, or is there a little bit of flexibility? Where is that? It does not look like new oak is going to have to be a requirement, because that was not always the case even for bourbon and rye. It was post-World War II, the world had moved on, we had glass manufacturing, plastic, stainless steel, the common container was no longer the barrel.
Yeah, the lumber lobby showed up.
The Cooper's Guild lobbied the US government, and that's why. It's the biggest question that I saw in the comments, and a lot of it was coming from Scotland, was, well, hey, Scotch has to age at least 3 years, why not the US? And the big answer back was, well, all of Scotland geographically can fit back in the area of Virginia.
Really? Wait.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't
and
realize
Virginia's one of the smallest states.
Yeah.
Think about Texas and how many Scotlands can fit inside Texas.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah.
All of Scotland can fit inside of Virginia.
Yes. By land, yes. They get 5 recognized whiskey regions.
Yeah.
You could argue for 6 easily. Imagine American single malt and all the variety there, and then think about the consistency of the climate in Scotland. Look at, say, Balcones won loud and proud on that one, first release they did. How unfair to them to say, sorry, you're gonna have to wait 3 years at least. And why let it get over oaked if it doesn't have to be?
Yes, those regional differences make a huge impact in the final product of that spirit. But beyond that, there's at least one more uniquely American angle on this category that St. George Spirits has been pursuing for 2 decades now.
We're looking for a unique expression of whiskey without being weird about it. Looking at whiskey from the perspective of a brewer was something that hadn't been done before. For me, what that perspective brought in was the use of more heavily roasted malts. Crystal malt, chocolate malt, black patent malt. These are things that we know in a beer give lots of flavor and aroma, but people weren't messing with that in Scotch whiskey because as soon as you start going above pale in the roasting process, you're destroying fermentable sugars. If you destroy fermentable sugars, you're decreasing your yield. If you're decreasing your yield as a brewery manager, your bonus is going to be less because they're paid their bonuses based on efficiencies. I don't give a rat's ass about efficiency. The accountants work for us. We don't work for the accountants.
And if you're playing upstream in the beer making process, throwing an American perspective at that, ASM is going to be a different category.
And the other side of that is we're putting out a product that we genuinely believe in.
There's so many people, especially now, there's so many distillers, whiskey makers in the industry. And the business model, it starts from this place of they love whiskey. But the model, the frame, the structure, the scaffolding for everything that they're building is one of these days I'm going to win enough awards. And then those awards are going to get me on enough shelves. And then that distribution is going to get me a buyout offer from Diageo or Pernod Ricard. And then I sell it. And then I ride off into the sunset as this romantic, idealized whiskey maker. You was like, nah, screw whatever the portfolio companies are doing. Get the lot of what I'm doing. I just want to explore and have fun and see what is the most amazing spirit I could put in a glass. Am I right?
I feel very seen right now, Rex. Yeah, you're totally right. Thanks. Yeah, no, and if you're chasing after having somebody like Diageo chase you down, you're going to be disappointed until it happens. And I'd much rather spend the time in between just being fucking happy.
Okay, so have you been keeping up with the development of the American single malt category, rules, the guidelines, this frame, the structure, the scaffolding of what it looks like that's going to be?
Reluctantly, I have been keeping up with that, yeah.
Reluctantly. Interesting.
I understand what some of the folks who are in that commission are going for, but my general take is that we're still in the nascency of this category as a category. And part of being an American is being rebellious and not having guardrails around everything. And we start building these tight boxes to pack this whiskey into at this point. We're stifling creativity.
In a lot of other categories, they've made brilliant stuff, but it kind of has the weight of tradition and expectations. It's already been clearly established. You have quintessential bottle releases that are iconic and like a good version. But with American single malt, it's kind of like the Wild West, the frontier.
Yeah. I think over the past few decades, a lot of handcuffs have been put on whiskey. And bourbon, rye, new charred oak, that's one example. But there's so many. Even in Scotland, you see that there's a very narrow box they get to play inside. And I'm all about protecting quality. You can absolutely do that and put those parameters around and then play and be creative, and having room to grow is so crucial.
See, that is interesting to me. Explorers hate fences and boundaries, but defenders love those barriers. You can't really have a country to defend if it doesn't have a border. Yeah.
I think you need to have a more compelling reason to exist than a federal law. I think your compelling reason to exist should be that you bring that product in for somebody to taste it. They're wowed by it, and they're like, I'm clearing space for you because you have a valid reason to be here, where half these products don't. I support the work that people are doing on it. I don't want to belittle anything that they're doing, but how long is that now? 24 years that we've had a product out in the market, a single malt. If mine doesn't say American single malt, I don't give a shit. All I care about is if you put it in your glass. You could call it rat piss if you wanted to, as long as you're going to sit down and drink it.
But
that was my initial stance on it. After that, I thought, you know what? Part of the drive, part of the motivation is to be able to carve out shelf space for a category instead of saying, well, there is no space for these American single malts.
If you've never looked into the difference between pioneers and popularizers, do. It's interesting. I think it's very relevant here. But I also see two people coming from some shared priorities, but also very different perspectives. And they both recognize the very simple and practical reality of you don't really get shelf space in stores unless there's an official category. It is what it is. And if you really want people to find your spirit and experience it, it would help if they could find the damn thing. And it has to earn that place on the shelf. I'd like to thank our sponsor this week. This is ZBiotics. The way you use this is really simple. You have the pre-alcohol before you drink responsibly, and then you enjoy tomorrow. So this is engineered by a team of PhD microbiologists, and ZBiotics pre-alcohol is a probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol, which is responsible for rough mornings. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. There's a lot of things out there that make a lot of big claims. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're not satisfied for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. If you're like me, you're not going out of your way to get drunk, you're not an irresponsible drinker. I was out with my friends, we're downtown Rainy Street actually, here in Austin. So I was drinking with my friends, you get to that point where you realize, if I have another drink, I'm definitely going to feel it the next morning. But I'd had ZBiotics. Let's see if this works for me. Everybody's going to be different, but for me, this worked extremely well. If you just want to have something on hand, so those moments that do come up that are worth celebrating with your favorite people, you're setting yourself up with the highest likelihood to not have a rough day the next day. You want to try this out for yourself, you're going to go to zbiotics.com/whiskeytribe, or you can also scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Whiskey Tribe at checkout. And because this is whiskey, one of the biggest factors is time. When it comes to American single malt, this is taking a while.
The last significant category that the TTB recognized was in the 60s.
Light whiskey, yeah. But
I feel optimistic. It's challenging, but no worthwhile thing is easy. We're due. We're due.
The consumer has changed. The consumer has really embraced things that are new and different. Our first release was in 2000. Scotch was doing incredibly well. Bourbons were doing incredibly well. I went to Whiskey Fest with bottles of this whiskey, and I'm just like so proud. This is my moment to step out onto the stage, and people would walk up to the table. What's this? California single malt. California. Okay, is it bourbon? I'm like, no, it's a single malt. Oh, it's a Scotch? No, it's from California. It can't be a Scotch. How old is it? It's 3.5 years old. Pass. And they'd walk away without even giving it a second glance, without even giving it a sip. Turn around now, and it sells out as soon as we release it.
all right, so who exactly are we talking to here? Because as interesting as ASM is, I think we're talking to two very interesting people, both operating at a very high level in the industry. Amanda over at Virginia Distilling, Lance at St. George Spirits. If these are the people that are making waves in American single malt, I think we got to peel back the label a little bit. You're doing the blending over there at Virginia Distilling.
I am, yeah.
Pull out your favorite whiskey, not your own.
So people who know me will be stunned that this is not a single malt whiskey.
Oh.
I know.
No, get out.
It's a blended malt whiskey.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
that's fine. That'll work.
As a blender, it spoke to me for obvious reasons.
Hell yeah.
Spice tree. This one I love, and it kind of breaks my heart that they're taking it away. But originally, it was made using French oak inserts. Very traditional in the wine world, not so traditional according to the Scotch Whisky Association. So they had a long battle, finally gave up because they couldn't really afford it, and reinvented things by doing the French oak barrel heads.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and if you're gonna do something, do it well and do it with heart.
What does an in-house blender do in an American distillery? Because you're not pulling from all these other brands like Compass Box. Compass Box is not a distillery, they're only a blender. What are you doing as an in-house blender at Virginia Distilling?
The same whiskey goes into every barrel for us. So it really is about maturation environment. We're very consistent with our grain, with our yeast, with the fermentation time, everything. We have very strict parameters, so that way I can be consistent to a point and then I get to play. I have two different lines. One is all about maturation, so it's focused on that, and the other line is all about cask finishing.
Am I correct that you are a Navy nuclear engineer?
Recovering, yes.
So how do you go from Navy nuclear engineer to distilling?
As one does, I developed a thirst for beer. Was making beer at a brew pub. A buddy of mine gave me a bottle of Lagavulin. Lagavulin was the very first whiskey that I had tried that made me understand why one actually drinks whiskey. As I learned that, I'm like, oh, holy shit, there's so much more to this than it just being a serious anesthetic. And got some books on whiskey and saw, well, hell, I'm halfway there making beer. There's this torturous process that they put us through as nuclear engineers, trying to train us very quickly to operate power plants. And a big part of it was learning to sort of look through the skin of this equipment and picture everything that's going on inside it. You turn a valve over here in a steam plant, you have to understand what effect that has down to the atomic level. It's like fucking Neo in the Matrix. Like you see everything cascading behind and you're like, I see everything. I know everything.
Well, I don't think I ever really considered the crossover between nuclear engineering and whiskey making. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of things that are there's a ripple effect across the entire process.
I enjoy engineering, but what really turns me on is feeding people. For a long time, I thought I was going to be a chef. I want to make things that when you put it in front of somebody, they pick it up and they're like, wow.
How did you get into it?
I fell into it. My background, my degree is English Lit. I did a lot of nonprofit work. I ended up just loving travel. I always love travel. So history, culture, food, drink, that was like my happy place. So whenever I traveled, I'd explore the local things, and I found single malt in particular spoke to me so much.
Yeah.
So anytime I go somewhere, I'd be like, what is their whiskey like? What is their single malt like? And I heard about this distillery opening up in Virginia, and I assumed it was going to be another bourbon distillery.
Yeah.
And when I saw they were doing single malt, I was like, oh my gosh.
Sign me up.
This is it. So out of character, I wrote a cover letter in like 10 minutes, and
Lit background, don't fail me now.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And I said, whatever you need, I'll volunteer on weekends. And they hired me. My first title was guest experience manager. But my first week was like putting out fire extinguishers, installing those, and picking out handrails for the visitor center. It was just like whatever needed to be done, I did it. And we had Scottish master distillers coming on site to set us up. And then eventually Jim Swan, and they all just kind of adopted me and shared a lot of information. So I'd show up at 6 a.m. with them, nobody else on site. I was there when the first drops came off the still. I was there to fill the first casks.
So you hustled your way into the position.
I didn't even know it.
Oh.
So by the time our whiskey had aged up, it was one of those moments of, oh, somebody needs to be doing something to help select these casks. And I created a sensory team and was educating them along with like our tour guides. And finally, our CEO was like, hey, do you want to be a blender?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because people ask me all the time, how do I get into whiskey? How do we start working at a distillery? And it's a version of just show up and be valuable.
Yes. It's a grind for
Yeah.
sure.
It is.
And then, like you said, you started doing railings and fire extinguishers.
Yep.
Amanda over at Virginia Distilling, they are making phenomenal single malts. That actually brings me to, hey, I'm about to solve your gift-giving problem this season for that whiskey lover in your life, because this gives me money, which is really the most important thing this Christmas season. No, totally messing around.
The Krusty Krab, come spend your money here!
This is 40% American single malt whiskey from Virginia Distilling in the Oloroso. Also, Virginia, 40%, their Fino finish. Also, 20% Del Bach. We have some off to the side for the holidays. You're gonna look at the price and you're gonna go, oof, it wasn't cheap for us either, but Irene has very specific marching orders, just put together the best blend you can get your hands on, and she did it. You're gonna take a sip and you're gonna say, thank you, sir. May I have another? And I'll be like, probably not, because this one's mine. Links in the description down below. Out of curiosity, what is the weirdest thing, because you're an explorer, this is experimentation, this is discovery, this is pushing the limits. What's the weirdest thing that you've distilled over the years?
Foie gras. We had
Goose liver?
Anthony Bourdain was coming for a visit and knew that he loved foie gras. The 10-liter still, I packed it full of brandy, high-proof brandy, and raw goose livers, and it was amazing. His feedback was, this is so wrong for all the right reasons. That's the weirdest thing that we've done that didn't actually have any purpose other than just sort of self-gratification and showing off for a celebrity that we actually really like. For years, I would distill my Christmas trees after Christmas. Obviously, it's piney, but there's also this really beautiful citrus component that comes through from pine needles that had effect on products that we made later on in the future, some of our gins.
I so thoroughly love and am frustrated by you. Because here I am thinking the experimentation that we're doing, this ridiculous distillation experiments, it's like, fuck it, there's no market for this. I just want to see what happens whenever we distill Luxardo cherries or some peppermints. But here you are, just over in California, is like, I'm doing some goose liver, you damn rookie. How dare you? I'm so impressed. How dare you?
Love and disgust are the two competing emotions for my wife as well, for me. So, but remember, I'm going to be celebrating 29 years at doing this. I have to go a lot farther afield to keep from being bored.
All right, you may be my spirit animal. If people want to try and get their hands on some St. George, you got to send me a bottle. I know you're getting sold out. I'm very curious now.
I imagine that you magnificent bastards have an outreach all over the country, maybe even the world. stgeorgespirits.com. We have a spirits locator on our website. You drop in a zip code. Maybe what I need to do is hand deliver those bottles, and we'll sit down and do some tasting on camera in Austin.
Dude, I love it.